Okay, guys, so we are just waiting for them to come back live in the courtroom. It looks like there's been a bit of a delay going on here. They are supposed to be back now at 1:30, so it should be any minute now, hopefully, unless there's another delay. If there is, then we will wait and go ahead and do this when they tell us that they're going to be back. So. It's just a long wait here. I know this has been a hard 3 days. We've been waiting to hear all of this right now. And so, I've been listening and the statements have just been heart wrenching. Some of them, I've got my box of Kleenex here with me because it is just so very sad. But we're waiting right now for them to come back to the courtroom. I'm hoping this is soon. It does not seem to be that they have returned just yet. So if you guys are watching, if you've watched the other broadcasts that we've done, which one of the impact statements has affected you the most? We'd love to know which ones you were affected by. Were there some that hit you in a certain way? This has been such a terrible, terrible time. Hi, Rebel. Good afternoon. They still haven't come back yet, so hopefully they're going to come back soon. If you guys have any questions about the case, I'd be happy to answer. Okay, so we've been asked if I'm still following. Hey, Amanda, am I still following Gypsy? Well, we're writing a book about Gypsy. We're still working on the series. Hi, Sabika. But I'm not in contact with Gypsy anymore. We broke that contact off when we had our differences of opinions. Not even that. It's just that they were not truthful in what they were presenting to the world. If you're still looking to hear all about that, you can check out the Good Wives Guide to True Crime over at madgingerentertainment.com. Or Spotify, Pandora, any of those. Yeah, we're working on it, Amanda. We're working on it. And it's going to have a lot of good stuff in there because it's going to have more stuff about some of the time period that was unaccounted for. There was a 2-year time period that nobody really knows what happened to them. There's no medical records or anything. So, so yeah, the book and stuff is going to really be enlightening when it comes out. We're working really hard on that. We have so much information that we still need to go through. I mean, we've gone through it once for the podcast and stuff, but to get it for the book, we want to really put it together in a really spectacular way. So we're working on that. But yeah, anyway, so oh, Sabika, you're from Pakistan. Wow, thank you for tuning in. I can't believe we're reaching Pakistan. That is awesome. All right, guys, I'm still waiting for this. Oh, it looks like something is happening. Okay, maybe it is ready. Let's see. I don't see it now. Okay. Okay, they are up. I'm looking to see. Hold on, guys. I'm looking for the feed. It seems like they are talking now. Okay, here we go. Let's get in here. Okay, come on. Okay. All right, just 1 second, please, guys. All right, there you go, guys.
Charlene married Lyman, we became a family of seven just as smoothly as if it had always been. Lyman was an incredible man in every way imaginable. He was warm, caring, thoughtful, fun, a wonderful father, kind, and whip smart. His boys, Jay and Gary, added two more, and we became a family of nine from then on. Gary and Tiffany were just 2 years apart, so they hung out together at all our family gatherings. Jay enjoyed playing with Brett. He kept his eye on a busy Brett whenever our family gathered, making sure he was safe and having fun. Thanksgiving and Christmas were especially fun, as Charlene made any time together special. Shortly after Lyman and Charlene married, and after seeing the abundant love they both had for our children, we asked them to become godparents. They were over the moon with joy at the thought of being permanently part of the children's lives. We planned a church service with our pastor, and Lyman and Charlene planned an extravagant picnic at the park afterwards. Our children were the kids that Charlene had longed for and didn't have. It was a beautiful thing to see. Most of you have seen the photo I took of Lyman and Charlene with her right arm around Lyman's neck at the picnic we had after the church service the day they became godparents. If you look closely in that picture, you will see Charlene is wearing a gold band I had given her when we were young to match the one she had given me. We exchanged those gold bands to honor our sisterhood. Neither of us had ever removed those gold bands. Mine has not been off my finger almost 60 years now. Charlene's ring was cruelly stolen from her at the time of her death. One day, I pray I will get that ring back and it will join the one I continue to wear in Charlene's honor. Charlene was busy, always busy. She worked full time with weekends off. Together, we decided to sell gold, which was a popular thing to do at that time. Each of us started our own gold business, and both of us became successful doing it. She would work all day and give showings at night. I would do showings in the evening after Don came home from work to watch the children. When we got home from a showing, no matter what time it was, we would call each other and share what we had sold and how much fun it was to meet terrific new people who then became our repeat customers. It was a wonderful time. Charlene always had a twinkle in her eye when she saw Tiffany and Brett. As a mother, nothing filled my heart more than to see her with our children. Lyman was the same way from the moment he met them. But all you had to do was to know what kind of a man Lyman was to spend time with his sons, Jay and Gary. They were wonderful in every way, fun, kind, loving, respectful, polite, and pure joy. I knew they would become responsible, successful men. They are all of that and so much more. When the Thousand Oaks Police Department came looking for me that very cold night in March of 1980, they told me I needed to speak to the detectives at Lyman and Charlene's house. Leaving the children with neighbors, Don and I drove to their house in Ventura immediately. Upon arrival, we were told what had happened. We were in stunned shock. It was a hole in our lives that would never be filled. Not only did we lose Lyman and Charlene, we lost Jay and Gary as well. Don and I loved those boys as if they were our own. Half our family had been wiped out. That is not something one recovers from. It's been a never-ending ache and sadness that does not go away. For Lyman and Charlene's funeral, I made cards to pass out to all who attended. It was Psalm 139, verses 13 through 18. And I took it from the Bible Charlene had monogrammed and given me. It read, "For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in that secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your before one of them even came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts. God, how vast is the sum of them. They would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. We saw Gary after the funeral. He was 12 years old. He was the one that found his father and stepmother bludgeoned to death in their bed. He looked white as a sheet that day. I can't even imagine. We held each other tightly, not knowing what was ahead. It would be 7 years later that we would get an unexpected knock at the door. It was sweet Gary. We were all at home that night and were beyond thrilled to see him. It was hard for all of us to find words. Gary was 19 years old then, so we were able to tell him how much we loved and missed him, and he understood. All of us love both Jay and Gary. We asked him to pass that same information along to Jay, and he said he would. The ensuing years have been hard for me. I am grateful for the daily reminder I have as I see the ring on my finger that Charlene gave me. When Tiffany was married, I felt Charlene's absence on a day that would have meant the world to her. When Brett joined the Army to go on to serve in 4 combat zones and stay in uniform for over 20 years, both Lyman and Charlene would have been busting their buttons with pride. Charlene was so much more than beautiful, and Lyman so much more than handsome. When she and Lyman were taken, the world lost 2 amazing people, full of life, and both with bright futures. The gift of their presence in our family cannot be measured. The loss of their presence in our family has been gut-wrenching. I cannot allow myself to think of all that they endured in death, but we know of the unspeakable horror they suffered. And for what? This day is not about the man who sits here awaiting sentencing. It is about every person whose life has been inexplicably changed and damaged in a way that has changed every one of them for life. Now they are left to make certain that their loved ones are represented for the remarkable people that they were. My heart goes out to each and every one of them. The only thing I'm grateful for is that Grams passed away not even a year before Lyman and Charlene. I thank God every day that Grams did not have to live through this nightmare. Now they're all reunited in heaven. Winslow, Charlene's father, was buried in Los Angeles. When Grams passed, Charlene and I took her ashes to his grave and spread them. When I picked up Charlene's ashes from the funeral home, I put them in our linen closet, which was utilized almost daily. Many years later, Brett said, "Mom, it's time." I wasn't sure I could let her go. Brett assured me it was the right thing to do. He drove me to Winslow's grave where I spread Charlene's ashes. Now Winslow, Grams, and Charlene are all together. I will join them there when my time comes. They are only ashes, as we all have the gift of eternal life. People endlessly talk of closure. In my world, closure does not exist. This is a despicable event that never leaves you. I'm not able to extinguish someone as if they never existed and move on with my life. For me and my family, Charlene and Lyman have been joyfully a part of our everyday lives. We take them with us wherever we go. We take comfort knowing Lyman and Charlene are at peace. Knowing that brings us peace. And true peace will come when all of us join them and our whole family is reunited in the loving arms of our Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody else wish to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. At this time, I would like to read a statement to the court on behalf of Carol Womack Billings. My name is Carol Womack Billings, and I am originally from Camarillo, California. Gladys Herzenberg and Charlene Herzenberg Smith were the only family that I had, other than my adoptive mother. They were and will always be my grandma and my cousin, even though we were not blood related. As far back as I can remember, and further with the help of photographs, they have always been in my life. Charlene was 8 years older than I was, but it never mattered to her. She took me everywhere with her. I cannot remember ever being without her by my side. When there were thunderstorms, I was there to protect her as she was afraid of thunder. When my adoptive mother was mean and abusive, Charlene was there for me. We were a team. I had a fantastic childhood because of these two women, Charlene and Gladys. When I had to move, it broke my heart, but we remained in each other's lives. The last time I was able to visit Charlene, she and Lyman had just purchased their home where they were eventually murdered. I was 22 at the time. I am 65 now, and my memory of the house is still so vivid. I am sure that is due to the horrific tragedy that occurred there. What I want the court to know is that I was 25 when Charlene was murdered. At that time, I had 2 young children. Because of Mr. D'Angelo's murderous actions, my family never got to know a fantastic human being, and I did not get to grow old with Charlene. She is in my thoughts almost every day and will be until the day I die. I miss her so much, and society was deprived of an awesome person. I love you, Charlene. Thank you for your time, Your Honor. Carol Billings.
Thank you, counsel. Was there anybody else who wished to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. At this time, we invite Jennifer Carroll Smith to step to the podium.
Thank you, counsel.
Your Honor, if you only knew how much time I spend with lawyers.
I feel sorry for you.
I learned a good lesson from one of my guests here tonight is apparently you're not supposed to lawyer at home. You could have benefited from that in my house. I became a good speaker thanks to that lawyering at home from a very young age. Last night was a rough night. Santa Cruz County is on fire. I'm worried about all my friends, worried even about my own home, which isn't in peril at this time, but it's terrifying. And I've watched this week everyone else speak, and I was really sad yesterday, and then last night it hit me that, you know, I realized my perspective is limited to almost like 6 spots where I could just keep looking at the same 6 spots, which have been the screens on these streaming, and I've just been fixed by those 6 spots. And it must be terrible to have perspective limited like that, because in fact, I usually operate in the world with a very broad perspective, and that's what I'll speak about today. So, and I think it's really important to pay attention to what's in your peripheral vision, because it'll tell you what's coming. It'll tell you what's actually there, even if it's not right straight in front of
Now,
you.
can I get you to do me a favor?
Yes, sir.
I want to hear every word you say.
Speak. There we go.
And I have my court reporters trying to keep up with you. So
I'm sorry, and I usually am able to be heard,
You
so
take as-
I will do better.
you know it's okay. You just take as long as you want. We don't
Thank
need to
you.
be in a hurry.
Thank you. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity this afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jennifer Carroll. I grew up Jenny Smith, and I'm here on behalf of Lyman and Charlene Smith, my father and my stepmother. And I'm also here on behalf of the boys you just heard about, Jane Gary Smith. And thank you so much, Jill, for coming today. And I also want to thank Carol, who is somewhere out there in Etherland, for writing those statements, because they both were adults and I wasn't, and they were able to know Charlene and my dad's life in a way I wasn't able to know. So it's so important to me that they were here today to speak on their behalf. I'm also here representing my father's brother, my Uncle Don, who I hope is watching right now, my mom, Marjorie Smith, to Margarita Marge, my grandparents, Lyman, Wilma, and Lila, my daughter, thank you for coming, and my nephews, who are too little to be part of this. They've trusted me with representing them throughout this process, and I've taken that responsibility incredibly seriously. This is like kind of amazing, because I see so many people that have supported me this whole time. Reporters, lawyers, everybody. So let's start at the beginning. And I really don't want Joe to experience this again vicariously, whatever. I know he's in his torpor somewhere trying not to listen, but hopefully a little of this will get through so he can remember. It was a gorgeous spring day in March of 1980 when my younger brother, Gary, arrived at my dad and Charlene's house to mow the lawn. At just 12 years old, he had already demonstrated tremendous self-discipline. I don't know about now, but he had it then. He took pride, he does have it now. He took pride in earning his own spending money. It was around noon when he entered the house, and he immediately knew something wasn't right. He was on his way to the back bedroom, my parents' room, and the digital alarm clock was going off. This had been going off for at least 72 hours, 3 days. The comforter, pulled up over the 2 bodies that lay in the bed, hid most of the horror. I suppose I could thank you, Joe, for that courtesy, but then that would be perverse, wouldn't it? Because there was nothing courteous about what happened in their home that night. The walls were splattered with blood and gray matter. The bed was saturated with bodily fluids. Gary gently lifted the corner of the comforter to find my dad's head, face down in the pillow, cemented to the fabric by blood. His blood, an ungodly amount of blood. I would learned just a few weeks ago that it represented all the blood in his body. That's exsanguination. Do you know how hard you have to work to get all the blood out of someone's body? Of course you do. Gary let the comforter drop, knowing he'd find the same on Charlene's side of the bed, and just couldn't bear to look. He picked up the phone right there on the nightstand to call for help. And in that moment, my 12-year-old brother acted with incredible bravery and courage. Brave because he didn't know what would happen next. Courageous because it took the strength to stay focused and to do whatever he could for his dad and stepmom. It might interest Joe to know that a child finding his parents brutalized beyond imagination didn't grow up to be a bad person. It might interest Joe to know we are capable as humans of making good choices. Despite seeing all that he saw Sunday afternoon, Gary did not become a perpetrator. As it happened that day, Mom went to check on Gary, wondering if he'd made it up the hill to his bike on Dad's house. Dad lived about a mile as the crow flied, but you had to ride up that damn hill on your bike. She rolled up on a scene that took her breath away. Police, yellow crime tape, and word that her son was with Judge Lewis and his wife Claire. They had found Gary alone, sitting on the outside wall of my dad's house, patiently holding it together while the police swarmed around him. I will forever be grateful for Judge Lewis and Claire's kindness and quick response. Meanwhile, my other brother, Jay, the soft one, the sweet one, and I were at home waiting for my mom to come back. We assumed she was running errands. Jay was 15 and I had just turned 18. As soon as her car stopped in the driveway, Gary ran into the house and back to his room. He was crying. My mom was ashen. Jay and I turned our focus to her. Your dad and Charlene are dead, she said, and I didn't realize it then, but our lives would change forever. Sorry, we've all said that. It sounds like it's this throwaway statement. And the problem with changing forever is you don't really know what that change is going to mean. You don't know what you've lost. So I feel like that's a little bit of a throwaway sentence, but I understand that you probably are all aware already of the impact you've had on so many. Joe might be surprised to learn that I was a suspect for 2 days. I still don't know how it was possible since Charlene had been raped. I don't know how it was possible because the force used to kill them exceeded my 5'2" stature. I don't know how it was possible that anyone thought I could be in any way manifest that level of hate required to execute 2 people I loved. Apparently, horrific, unimaginable crimes have a way of creating unintended consequences. I do know the police were likely desperate. They pursued every lead. I had to take a lie detector test. The irony is not lost on me, since I'm guessing Joe didn't have to take a lie detector test. The story was reported in the newspaper, and the people in Ventura, my friends, my teachers, my family, my neighbors, knew I was a suspect. I was an 18-year-old young woman, barely an adult, and a suspect in my own father's murder. Thank you, Joe. Thanks. That was awesome. Your Honor, I ask you to imagine what that does to a young 18-year-old. I've lived with the shame for decades. It's your shame, Joe. Excuse me, just gonna pull it together a little bit. Okay, here we go. Let's transition. Writing a victim impact statement after 40 years is not an easy task. Looking at the guidance provided, this statement has 3 objectives: to explain the physical, emotional, and financial effects of the crime. Let's discuss the physical impact. I suffered from migraines, depression, anxiety, but I was able to cope and move forward, as everybody else who's been here has been able to do. My brothers were also physically resilient, so I can let this one slide. In fact, my family is remarkably healthy, thank God. Other than the true victims, my dad and Charlene, we have no physical scars. Financially, the situation is somewhat similar. In 1980, we had a lot of crime-related expenses. I paid for almost out of my share of my dad's life insurance. Alas, after 40 years, I don't have receipts. I didn't expect a long game on this one, but Joe did. Joe had receipts. Joe and his wife Sharon worked hard to ensure that he'd be destitute at this point. Based on their efforts, he has no assets to attach. And just a fact check, it's unavailable to my family because these crimes happened in the years before victims were offered restitution. Yep, there are no financial damages I can claim. That means I'm only left with describing the emotional impact. Your Honor, I'm not sure I can do that, but I'm going to try. My mom always yells at me for sniffing. I can't be sniffing. Try it, Mom. I've struggled to write this statement because it's nearly impossible to know what would be if Joe didn't rape, torture, and beat my parents to death. How might they have changed the world? God love you. Who might I have become? How do I know what it might have been? Assessing the impact is challenging. Your Honor, my dad shares a resume that's extremely close to yours. You know I Googled you, right? Law school. Also, I met one of your students. She's amazing, and she thinks you're amazing. Law school, some work in the DA's office, and then private practice handling litigation as a criminal defense attorney. He was hoping to be appointed by Jerry Brown to a seat on the Superior Court, exactly where you sit. Joe might find it interesting to know that my dad once sat where his attorneys sit. Lyman defended a man facing the death penalty. He knew the man was guilty of rape and murder, yet he believed in the system that said his client was entitled to a defense. My dad faithfully championed our democracy and the rule of law. And thank you, all of you, for doing the same. Charlene was ready to have kids. Coincidentally, at 33 years old, she was the same age I was when I decided to have a family. I had known Charlene since I was 5 years old. As my dad's new secretary, she arrived with enthusiasm and style. I thought she was the hippest thing on earth. Short skirts, long hair, huge smile, and a decade younger than my parents. That was from my mom. She was the epitome. My mom was not a 60s woman. She was the epitome of the mid-1960s in all the coolest ways. I wasn't thrilled a few years later when my dad left my mom for Charlene, but by age 18, I'd realized how happy she'd made my father, and I respected their relationship. So what if they had lived? They were building a new home in Santa Paula. I believe they would have had kids, half siblings I would have adored. My dad, a Democrat with political ambitions, would have likely been appointed to the bench, and then later he would have run for office. I have no doubt he would have won. As a political junkie, I likely would have participated in his campaign, and who knows where that might have taken me. Don't tell Kamala. My life might have been extremely different, but of course, this is an abstraction, magical thinking, a fantasy. Of course, that's not what had happened. Because of this crime, I lived my life anchored by reality, and I don't spend much time thinking about what could have been. Instead, I focus on what is and what can be. So let's turn to the what is. These are the truths that are a direct result of Joe's behavior. It is true that my family doesn't talk about what happened. I do, but they don't. As you might imagine, it's been a lonely journey for me, but I fear it's even more lonely for my brothers. They hide it away, much like the jewelry, Joe, that you melted down and kept in that antique stove in your garage. An ugly, dark secret that is only shared with the people they trust. My grandfather adored his two sons with every ounce of his being. When Joe killed my dad, my grandpa barely recovered. His sons were the proof of his hard work and commitment to their future. He was so damn proud of my dad. My uncle, my dad's brother, lost his best friend. My dad was his big brother, and they were close. Two loquacious boys from Idaho who like to fish, although, Uncle Don, you speak a lot slower than my dad ever did. It is true that Charlene left behind two young godchildren that were the moon and the stars for her. They were so little when Charlene was killed. Tiffany and Brett were benefactors of her generous heart and unstoppable spirit. I wrote here, I can't imagine how their parents dealt with helping them cope with the loss, but I actually can. Thank you. With Charlene's delightful grandmother Gladys, while Charlene's delightful grandmother Gladys doted on her, Charlene didn't have immediate relatives in her life, but she did have family. It speaks to her character that the Doyles, her ex-husband's family, stayed in touch with her regardless of her divorce. It also speaks to her character that her best friend Jill Karen and her cousin Carol and many others loved her as if she were their sister. It is true that while Charlene and I struggled to find our way when she transitioned from secretary to stepmom, right before her death, our relationship was starting to change. The last night I saw both Charlene and my dad, we had our first real grown-up talk. It was silly and revealing. We talked about smoking marijuana and boyfriends and going to college. And I'm so grateful for that Thursday night. It was 1 week before you, Joe, entered their home. I still wonder if you were peeping at me there that night, laughing and talking with Charlene at the table. I wonder too, Joe, if knowing that Charlene and Lyman had kids who loved them was one of the things that really pisses you off. It must be hard to see people with children who love them like that. It is true that Dad and Charlene's friends, associates, and business partners were devastated by their deaths. Many of their friends were the people responsible for investigating the crime. I am not sure how they coped as they struggled to find the truth among the ruins. Both Dad and Charlene had so many meaningful friendships, and they always helped others. They were generous that way. I know if I were to lose any of my friends right now, it would be debilitating. If they were lost to murder, it could be crippling. I can only imagine how their friends felt. There are some, even today, who can't speak about it, not even to me. It is true that our friends, the children of Ventura, who had relationships with Jenny, Jay, or Gary, were deeply affected by what happened. One of those children was supposed to be here today. I have so few people that actually have ever met my dad and Charlene, but she was prevented from coming because of the fire. But I know she's there right there looking at me. In fact, my dad and Charlene were meant to have dinner at her house that night. But of course, they never showed. There's no easy way for children to understand that kind of violence or hate, especially when adults don't want to talk about it. How does a parent explain something like this to a child? I didn't realize what these children, my friends, my brother's friends, to tell me how this hurt their young hearts about, can you imagine, children, the guilt they felt because they didn't do enough to support us. Just sit with them, children, thinking they didn't do enough to support the other children whose parents had been murdered. They have talked to me about how they have carried this with them their whole lives. I had no idea. There's a reason it's called a ripple effect. It is true, this case has been a part of my entire adult life. For decades, I kept an eye on things related to the crime, but I had to soldier on, go to school, raise my kid, grow my career. And then in April 2018, a text from my friend Lisa shattered my reality. A suspect had been arrested. With Joe's arrest, my life fell apart. All right, hang on just one second. Okay. There was no way for me to ignore what had happened any longer. It was my fight. After years of others telling our story badly, I felt responsible for making sure that the truth about Dad and Charlene was being shared. I've also been committed to pursuing conviction on this case, ensuring a name was finally attached to that infamous DNA string. I remain compelled to do everything within my power to help them rest at peace. It is true that prolific destruction, like what Joe did, creates a cacophony that is unimaginable. Police, victims, investigators, lawyers, media, and more creep into your life in ways that are hard to characterize. It's like the constant bleat of a car alarm, relentless, persistent, and of undetermined value. Well, at least that's how it feels for me. While many of the lesser recognized players have been vital and added value, what has been challenging is coping with the biggest noisemakers. These are the people who often have the benefit of a larger platform and all too frequently focus on the trivial. These players are energized and compensated for their trade in salacious details, theatrical stunts, and adolescent humor. They are rewarded for their bad behavior. But maybe that's our fault. We click, we watch, we read, and we relish. I have struggled with this miasma. What we are doing here today is incredibly serious to me. We are talking about putting a human away for life. That is a serious responsibility, and this case has enough inherent drama without needing to create more. I think my struggle with this dichotomy is absolutely my parents' fault. I was raised to respect the rule of law. It's been a part of who I am from the get-go. I was raised in an advocate to value human rights and civil rights and to question authority. I learned this from my father and my mother. And if you look at who raised them, you'll see it must be in our DNA. That's right, DNA is powerful stuff. And finally, in this case, it is true that there is no justice. On June 1st of this year, as the Black Lives Matter folks marched through the streets of Sacramento, I learned of the plea agreement. At 1:30 in the morning, as looters hid from the police underneath my bedroom window, right here in Land Park, I cried about losing the possibility of a trial. I didn't want much, just a preliminary hearing. It would have at least provided us with more insight into what others knew about Joe and the gallons of blood on his hands. But that wasn't meant to be. Predictably, Joe decided to forego his manhood and take the easy way out. Interestingly, manhood is defined as having courage, strength, and ironically, sexual potency. It's not surprising that once again, Joe's lack of manhood is the spectacle. As I sat in my bedroom in Sacramento trying to wrap my head around the inevitability of a plea, I found myself saying again and again, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. For me, Joe being arrested is not justice. Joe being in a cage in the county jail for the last 2 years is not justice. Joe sitting here with his blank face, desperate need to try to ignore what he's done, to not validate his victims, to take no responsibility, is not justice. Joe spending the rest of his life in prison is not justice. Joe being executed is not justice. For me, perhaps the greatest impact these crimes have had on me as a victim was coming to terms with this. Justice is not possible in this case. And because of that, I won't have peace. But that's okay. Because as I said earlier, I also focus on what can be. What can be is an active choice. And we've heard nearly every statement from the people that have come here to speak to you, Your Honor, talk about the idea of choice. Bad things happen in life, that's just part of the experience, but how you choose to deal with them is the most important part. We can decide who we are and how we want to live. I chose my path based on how I want to express my humanity. I embrace life with optimism, humor, compassion, and the life positive expectation that things will get better. I'd like to think those of us who aspire to do good are legion, especially when compared to the people who choose to live their lives hurting others, and in this case, hurting even his own family. It might surprise you that because of this case, a lot of good has happened. I don't give Joe an ounce of credit for any of the good. He was merely a tornado, a whirlwind of fury with no purpose. The good is the rainbow that appears after the storm, providing the hope that fuels the people who rush in to help. The bad lasts just moments, but the good endures. So let's take a look at what good will endure. It's not because of Joseph DeAngelo that we now use DNA to release the innocent and convict the guilty. The good is the law has been changed, and as a society, we remain committed to ensuring we are doing everything possible to find the truth and convict the guilty. Nope, I won't give Joe credit, but let's make sure the other prisoners who've been convicted because of DNA know they have Joe to thank. It's not because of Joseph DeAngelo that sex crimes against women are now taken more seriously. In fact, last night on the Democratic Convention, Mariska Hargitay talked about speeding up rape kits and how fast we want to get rape kits turned. Nope. The good is now, with a few exceptions, sexual assault crimes result in more serious consequences for the offenders. I won't give you credit, Joe, but let's make sure the convicts serving time for sex crimes they might otherwise have gotten away with know they have you to thank. It's not because of Joseph DeAngelo that we're convicting more rapists more quickly. The good news is laws have been changed, statutes of limitations increased, and we are now testing those kits faster. Nope, Joe, I'm not going to give you that credit, but let's sure the additional men incarcerated for rape today know they have you to thank. It's not because of Joseph DeAngelo that his victims have gone on to live amazing lives. The good is that they have embraced the trauma, found their strength, and are paying it forward to help others. Nope, Joe, I won't give you the credit, but let's make sure survivors know, please know, one human being cannot take away your potential, your goodness, or your compassion. This case has forced me to think a lot about justice and what it means. For weeks, I struggled to find that answer. I talked with folks from all walks of life. I listened to academics and those in the trenches. And after much consideration, I think I found my answer, Your Honor. Justice is about equality. Justice is a reflection of our collective social consciousness. If it aspires to be fair, it should serve us all equally. But justice is meted out at the hands of human beings. As such, it is often capricious and biased. It can bend with both compassion and prejudice. As a result, more often than we care to admit, justice is not equal. In the case of the people of California versus Joseph DeAngelo, justice has not been served. At a time when our, bear with me, I really went out my talk here with notes. At a time when our culture is seriously assessing its role in perpetuating racism in the criminal justice system, this case is a warning. DeAngelo is a cliche. He is a cliche of all the white men in power who steal from everyday people like us, taking from us our taxes, our goodwill, our kindness, and exploiting that for their own personal gain. Yes, sir, you've become a trope. It's everywhere. At a time when our culture is seriously assessing its role, we find that what happened with Joe DeAngelo is the epitome of white privilege. Joe was not shoved or punched or even thrown to the ground when he was arrested. He was treated with dignity he didn't deserve. Joe was not shot on sight when he was spotted by Visalia Officer Bill McGowan. These are the hallmarks of white privilege. Joe's been allowed to attend court in a wheelchair. As I know, my friend Chris Pedretti lay out in her backyard, naked, a week before Christmas, wondering if you were going to kill her or not. She froze, and yet we are kind enough to not only allow you to hide your orange shirt right now, but to sit there with a sweatshirt on because you got cold. That's who we are. You have been allowed to behave, apologize, Your Honor, but in my opinion, disrespectfully toward the court. You don't even have one overworked public defender. And by the way, if y'all are overworked, I understand that. But you have 3 incredibly talented lawyers at your disposal. That is a hallmark of white privilege. Joe was a cop. He used those precious skills designed to protect us from people like him to commit heinous crimes. Even when he was arrested for shoplifting, convicted, and fired from the Auburn Police Department, Joe, you appealed the firing. That's righteous indignation. Relatable. You didn't think you deserved to be fired. You even appealed the ruling when they said, yes, you did. These are the hallmarks of white privilege. Joe took what he wanted at every turn. In collusion with his wife, he liquidated and transferred his assets. He used the public defender. He gamed the system so he could sit here with remarkable legal representation at taxpayer expense. These are the hallmarks of white privilege. Joe will likely be placed in protective custody when he gets to prison. He won't be in the general population with his peers where he should be. He won't get to see a reflection of himself in the faces of other convicts who are just like him. These are the hallmarks of white privilege. Until a man as despicable and frankly worthless as Joseph DeAngelo endures what nearly every other criminal must endure, there is no justice. For me, there is no peace. Your Honor, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have watched you this week, and you're not like a lawyer, I know. Your attentiveness, your empathy, your ability to listen and see people and to tolerate all of our feelings, which in my experience, lawyers kind of hate the feelings part, has been tremendous. And I truly, truly, truly appreciate you for this, because it's you don't know, but among the survivors we talk, and it's been so important how you've been with us. So thank you.
You're gonna make me cry. That's pretty good.
Go tell the kids you're good, Dad. Cheryl, first, I want to thank the Ventura District Attorney, Greg Totten, and his team for all they've done. You're the elected, and you managed to keep politics out of this. You managed to do this because you were focused on justice and doing the right thing, and I thank you so much for that. Cheryl, you let me be part of the team. Thank you. You've been more than I could have hoped for. A strong, powerful, empathetic, and brilliant woman. And you literally demonstrate why we need more women fighting the good fight. Sorry, I gotta make you cry too, but God damn, you've been awesome. I will never, ever forget you. Thank you, Dr. Peter Speth. He's out there in TV land somewhere. He is the brilliant deputy coroner for Ventura, who that day took 2 specimens from Charlene. Specimens that went right back to you, Jojo. Yep, those specimens more than ever were so vital in this investigation, because baby, that's how we got you. Just left your seed everywhere. I will be forever grateful to you, Dr. Speth, for doing that day. All of us are. Thank you to those in law enforcement. Where's Larry? There he is in the back. Thank you to those of you in law enforcement, folks from Ventura who aren't here today, who honorably protected the chain of custody. You guys never gave up on the case. And I thank all of you watching at home. Thank you to those in the media who've worked hard to tell our story accurately and with compassion. I feel so privileged to have 2 of those people in this room right now. Thank you, you guys. Thank you to all my friends, those in this room, those watching, and those of you sending text messages right now. You've provided me with abundant love and support, and I honestly can't describe that in words. Okay, you come up here. Yes, you need to come up here with me. I gotta talk to you. Or she wants to kill me. Thank you to my incredible daughter. You've had to endure a changed woman for the last 2 years. You've watched me struggle, adapt, deal with crazy people, and fight the good fight. You are my center, and for a 21-year-old, you have tremendous wisdom, patience, and empathy. I love you, kiddo. Keep making the world a better place. It needs you. Okay, you can go run away now. I'm almost done. And thank you to my mom. Mom, you took every damn phone call, listened to every rant, comforted me when I was feeling alone, I'm gonna sniff during your talk. Supported me when I was feeling attacked, and counseled me when I couldn't see the path forward. I love you, Mom. I've dragged you with me every step of the way, and I could not have done this without you. I'm gonna go buy you a bottle of the good scotch. Costco has a sale price. In conclusion, for all of you out there who have watched and experienced this case and been moved by the horror, the incredible, relentless horror inflicted by Joe D'Angelo, I have an ask. I want you to go volunteer to support your local cold cases. I want you to go learn about sexual assault, the bias, and how to talk to people who have been sexually assaulted. They want you to talk to them. They really, really do. Survivors of all of these things need you. I would like you to call for help if you notice suspicious behavior. It is not being nosy if it's coming from a good place. I want everyone to see the people that you love. And I mean, really breathe them in, see who they are, and listen to them. Appreciate them for who they are, warts and all. Time is too short here to not see them for the beautiful people that they are. Please be patient, be kind, and together, I believe we can move ourselves forward to a better place. Thank you so much, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. Does that conclude Ventura County?
It does. Thank you, Your
All
Honor.
right, thank you very much. Okay, we're good to go.
Oh, that's right. We just need a moment to sign.
No problem. Deputy Thompson, when you get a chance, may I see you?
What's that?
When you get a chance, may I see you?
I'm not through out there. Ready to go?
Sir. No. They're protecting me. I feel good about that. All right, thank you. The record reflects Mr. D'Angelo is present, represented by defense counsel. This is the time we've scheduled to hear from the victim's family involving the crimes and uncharged acts, if any, committed by Mr. D'Angelo in the county of Orange. Sentencing will occur on August 21st, 2020. Can any of the attorneys that are representing Orange County please state their names for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. Deborah Boyd, Assistant District Attorney for Orange County.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Todd Spencer, District Attorney for Orange County.
Thank you, sir. As I've said, this is on calendar for survivor impact statements. On June 29th, 2020, Mr. D'Angelo entered a plea of guilty to the following crime, count 12. The crime of murder in the first degree of Manuela Whitney, which occurred February 6, 1981 in the county of Orange. Is there any family member that wish to be heard as to count 12?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Your Honor. At this time, the people would like to call Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Drew Widhun. I appreciate the time for allowing me to be here and represent my family, specifically my beautiful sister-in-law, Manuela Widhun, her parents, Horst and Ruth Rohrbeck, and her husband, my brother, David. The photograph my family and I are sharing here today, great-looking couple, aren't they? Represents a wonderful day and time many years ago that includes the 4 family members I just introduced you to. Sadly, it reminds us all of Manuela's precious life that in February 1981 was taken so viciously and cowardly by this convict. Your Honor, my family and I struggled with the question of should we show this photograph or not, mainly to avoid the opportunity for the convict to relive what probably is to him a fond memory. But in the same instance, we realized that would only be a concession for which cannot and will not be tolerated. This convict, in this setting or any other, has earned and deserves absolutely nothing. So I share this photograph with love and remembrance of and for my family, and to celebrate Manuela's life rather than to continue to mourn and despair over the short 28 years she was with us, which is in total thanks to this convict, who made sure she would not see 29. How proud it must be. We are all aware of the circumstances of what and how this convict did what it did to Manuela, for which it admitted to and pled guilty a few weeks ago. That day and time reminded me personally of being nothing short of a total and unconditional surrender. Even while attempting to use a frail and feeble voice, I'm sure practiced to get just right from the second it was taken into custody until today. It's still making every effort to have us all believe that it might actually be a little bit human, capable, and hopefully considerate of our sympathy, mercy, and forgiveness. For me personally, I'll be happy to defer those prerogatives to God himself. I will give this convict credit for one thing. At least it never broke character. And by the looks of things, these proceedings are Act 2. Regardless of a very bad performance, the admissions it made that day to me were reminiscent of a war crimes tribunal. Without defensive actions or argument for innocence, for every atrocity this convict committed against so many fine people, their families, and entire communities. There were so many casualties in this war that lasted decades to conclude. Thankfully, many are still living and with us here to make their own statements of courage, strength, and survival. Also, sadly, based on this convict's ultimate cowardly and vicious actions, some are not, including Manuela. But with what the convict may have believed were separate victories in whatever war it was waging, it is without question too much of a coward to discuss, clarify, or apologize for. They all ultimately led us to be here this week in unison to let this convict know that it sure as hell lost this war, and in a very big way. I'll leave the hideous description as to what this convict physically did to Manuela to history, except to remind the court that after forcing its way into Dave and Manuela's home, and while in her sleep, Manuela was literally pounced on, controlled, restrained, and secured by this convict as if she was nothing more than prey to the predator. No one other than the other brave victims who survived and can begin to know or try to imagine and comprehend what that moment of pure terror, with the realization of what was happening to them, must have been like. This convict knew. It was there every time to create and execute every single second of it. For the record, Your Honor, Manuela was very petite. She weighed a buck nothing. And she was no physical threat to anyone or anything. She was given no opportunity by this convict to try and defend herself in any way at all. Then, after that one cowardly and inhumane instant of dominance, this convict took as many minutes or hours it felt was required to viciously and cowardly violate her, while ensuring that Manuela was stripped of any and all human right, with final intent only to be considered in this convict's warped and inhuman sense of things as nothing more than scrap, to be later removed and discarded as if she never lived at all, having absolutely no value. Manuela was nothing more to this convict than one more kill, one more victory, and one more trophy. Soon after Manuela was murdered by this convict and buried by her parents, her husband David, and the rest of our family, Horst and Ruth moved back to Germany without goodbyes or requests to keep in touch, taking only some personal belongings, photographs of Manuela, police case numbers, and unanswered questions to the horrors they'd been forced to endure as the only reminders of their lives in the United States. They kept breathing for a few years, which was really all they could do. Not sure if they really wanted to do that, until they too passed on, and if we believe as I do, were reunited with Manuela and hopefully finding peace. God knows they earned it. After February 1981, my brother David lived, in my opinion, the next 27 years on borrowed time, from illness, despair, grief, anxiety, and depression, which took an accumulative toll that in 2008 finally became too much for his physical body to continue to endure. There is a reason David felt and experienced those things. It was because he was mortal. Our brother was a good man. Those of us who spent time and lived with him saw and experienced the steady decline of faculties, initiated in no small part by this convict's inhuman selection of his wife Manuela to remove him from. Dave went on with whatever strength he could muster and display, all the while knowing there would no longer be anniversaries or the anticipation of children, grandchildren, birthdays, vacations, family holidays together, or anything remotely familiar to a normal life. As this convict made sure that in one instant, those rising certainties and so much more would be stolen from them both and all of us who knew and loved them. Your Honor, for reference and perspective, I apologize for the photograph. That can happen to something when it's left to the elements for 40 years. I'd like to share another photo of a quiet place where Dave and the rest of us, mostly Dave alone, visited to spend time as close as he could get to his wife, to try and make sense of things while bleeding with grief, knowing he could no longer look at, hold, or protect her. He remembered their short life together that should have been allowed to grow and prosper, but never would. At least he had her name to see and read that was carved into a piece of stone, so anyone who happened to walk by and look down would know Manuela was there. Dave knew, never forgot. He was the one who had to make the decision to pick the piece of real estate where she would be placed underground, never to be seen again. There were so many things he could not forget, no matter how hard he tried, but especially how and why she came to be there at the hands of this convict. And if all of that wasn't enough, Your Honor, my brother Dave had to live for years with scrutiny, suspicion, and rumors that he himself may have been involved in Manuela's death. No one should have to endure such intrusion. But considering everything that was known or unknown at that time, any rational person could understand and sympathize with that thinking. Dave understood, said he did anyway, but we'll really never know the exact toll it took on him. We all knew Dave had no ability or motivation to ever be involved in something so grotesque and inhuman. He continued to profess and educate as to his innocence until it was proven in 2001, I believe, when the DNA link was identified that established one suspect in so many more sexual assaults and homicides throughout California. We all took a very long moment to finally have it understood to everyone of Dave's vindication, but also with the realization that Manuela's murder was part of something that was so much larger than anyone could have ever feared or imagined. Dave died before knowing of the convict's identification and arrest. He always knew it was coming, just a matter of when. And while being crazy but not stupid, I believe this convict knew it too. I believe he knew it all along. And it's nice to think it developed a sore neck from having its lifeless head on a swivel for so long, waiting for the real cops to show up. When the convict left its little business cards in the form of DNA, and I stress little, it was because of the ability, in our case, of Manuela's body to preserve it and law enforcement's dedication to meticulously and thoroughly retrieve it for proper preservation and testing that ultimately helped lead them directly to this animal. Yes, it took several years, but the countless law enforcement professionals who never stopped working and believing that they would one day identify, then have the privilege of paying a visit to take into custody a monster in human form would once for all finally happen. And it sure as hell did. In Manuela's case, I believe that she, as well as all the other victims and their families, simply would not allow for anything less. Collectively, they helped create a drive within so many good people with one goal, which was to develop a positive, overwhelming, and definite outcome for everyone involved that I'm not sure can ever be equal. Our family, and I'm sure all others, will forever be thankful and indebted to everyone who sacrificed their own lives in many ways for all of ours. That fact has never been, nor will it ever be marginalized or forgotten. Your Honor, I feel I have a unique perspective of things from both sides of this fence. As being a family member of one of the convict's murder victims, I was also a very proud member of the law enforcement community. As a police officer, and I say this for the convict's edification, a real one, for nearly 2 decades and involved in countless incidents and investigations, some strikingly similar to those committed by this convict, I can't help but feel as if I am both qualified and obligated to give an opinion as to the impact and effect this convict's very short, uneventful, cowardly, and fraudulent time masquerading as a public servant had on our, and I mean all of us real cops community. After the convict was identified, arrested, and background made known, what the real cops did in this case and proudly continue to do today by choice with unending, unwavering, and undesiring of credit professionalism is simply the job they swore to do, seeking justice while hearing and absorbing consistent references to this convict as being a former police officer. Now, on its face, there might be some paperwork and photographs somewhere that might argue that that's a true statement. But that's where similarities to real police officers end, and all true law enforcement professionals. It's been discussed ad nauseum, but it's certainly true that the badge and uniform this convict fraudulently put on and hid behind represented nothing more than the ski mask it put over its face to conceal its true identity. which was only intended for one thing: to help it learn and further its insatiable need and desire for the destruction of innocent lives. Your Honor, this thing was no cop. Not one dare moment could it be considered one after it raised its cowardly right hand, kind of a reoccurring thing, I think, but kept its fingers crossed on the left whilst repeating the oath that we real cops hold sacred. I would submit that this convict never did a selfless or worthwhile thing in its miserable and useless life, especially while falsely representing me and my profession, all members of law enforcement sworn and not, and the good people it was supposed to serve and protect. I also feel a strong sense of empathy for the true police officers who are in the same departments and have had and have been forced to live with what has been placed on them by this convict's actions and affiliation. These police departments certainly do not deserve scrutiny, and they remain a very vital and respected part of our community. My wish would be for an official decree that negates and expunges all records, references, and memories of any kind regarding this convict's association with law enforcement. It deserves nothing less. Finally, Your Honor, as to the convict itself, I think I speak for all concerned that regarding any remorse or apology, this convict may either try to express or be internally considered. We have no expectation of ever hearing it, but for me personally, I could care less if it does or doesn't. It would all be BS anyway. The elements required but were willingly removed by this convict itself that might allow for honest impact or consideration if it felt led to say anything, left the building a very long time ago, as it would require both humanity and a soul, which in this convict's case, neither apply. If somewhere back in time, they were both enthusiastically purged from this thing, never to return. With that being known, and to this day being very aware and understanding of what it did, within the convict, I believe there is and was no desire or thought to show remorse or contemplation of actions. There is and was absolutely no desire, although it certainly had the ability to reason and decide with a positive or humanistic way that it had a choice not to perform such grotesque, sadistic, and unimaginable acts. It committed every single one of them with what the court has most appropriately defined and the convict admitted to as malice aforethought. Even while knowing that, from what I'm hearing lately, it's all Jerry's fault. Well, go ahead with that one, Joey. But remaining a true fraud and coward to the end, the fact remains there's absolutely nothing good, bright, or redeemable behind this convict's black and soulless eyes, no matter how many personalities and or demons are in occupation. Your Honor, while preparing this, I realized that moving forward, there is one thing the convict can do that will certainly be worthwhile and very much appreciated. All it has to do is simply stop breathing. It obviously isn't interested in doing that because it knows, I know it knows, and we all know it knows, that when the slits finally close for the last time, and it helps to save a lot of very good air that's been wasted for over 70 years now, it's very aware that it will certainly die alone, uncared for, unloved or mourned, then finally dissolve into nothing more than a pile of former inhuman waste to be consigned and deposited onto the ash heap of history. A very just and eternal sentence, if there ever was one to be exacted. I'll only take a couple more minutes, Your Honor.
No problem. Take your time.
I'm catching a plane later because I have a family at home, unlike him, that truly loves me.
Take
I
as
can't
much-
wait to get home to him.
All right, you take as much time as you need, sir.
Your Honor, I'll end by sharing that by chance the other day, I happened upon a documentary on the crimes committed by Dennis Rader, better known as the BTK serial killer from the 1970s and 80s. I don't know how I keep getting connected with serial killers. In an interview, a son of parents and two siblings that were murdered by BTK gave the most relevant and true statement that is so appropriate and certainly meaningful regarding Manuela and the other murder victims. So with much respect, what the gentleman said was, and I quote, "For this instant, after my family has been gone for almost 40 years now, they're relevant again in today's society. They existed, and the world knows they existed. And they didn't just get erased from life and swept under the carpet. They were somebody, and they were worthy of life." Thank you for the court's time, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess, council. It's about 5 to 3. We'll try to start back up here at 10 after 3.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, council.
Okay, guys, so in the middle of this, I'm going to tell you what just happened. They arrested Michael Turney in the disappearance and murder of Alyssa Turney, the one that we have been talking about. Alyssa Turney, whose father, who's we talked with her sister Sarah Turney, who we did the whole series on. They have just arrested her father, Michael Turney. This is huge news, guys. They have been, this case has been open for quite a bit of time. And we just did a whole series on it. Colleen and I did over on Murder by Design. If you're on our Facebook page, we did it over on our YouTube channel. Guys, I am so excited that they have finally done something about this. This is incredible. I can't even tell you how exciting that is that they have done this. I am just beyond excited about it. Beyond excited. We will be back when they come back from the recess, but I can't even believe that this has happened. What a great day. What a great day. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast here, and we'll be back when they return in about 15 minutes or so. Okay. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back.